As I stated earlier, Chapter 1 is a lot to do with definitions and terminology, and that is also true for 1.3. We're going to look at what is considered and called experimental design. So when you're doing a study, there's a particular experimental design that we can look at. There are two common techniques for gathering data. Common techniques for gathering data that you need to be aware of. The first one is what we call an observational study. And this is when observations and measurements of individuals conducted in a way that does not change the response or the variable being measured. The researcher observes without interfering. So that's the key there, observing without interfering. So an example would be if we were doing, say, a study on does regular exercise help prevent colds? Does regular exercise help prevent colds? So an observational study would be when you do not apply any treatment or anything. You just get a group of people, you observe them in their normal everyday. You might give a questionnaire that asks, how much do you exercise? How many colds did you have? But there's no treatment involved at all. There's no interference. You just let people go about their regular day. The second type is when you actually conduct experiments. And this is when a treatment is deliberately imposed on the individuals in order to observe a possible change in the response or variable being measured. The best technique for reaching valid conclusions. So this would be where a treatment is deliberately imposed. So a treatment in our example would be where you asked them and had them do exercise. And then of course you would have one group that specifically does exercise, and then the other group there would be no exercise. That way you could compare the two. Now there's different types of experiments. We have what is called a completely randomized experiment. And of course, randomized is what's key here. It's a random process is used to assign each individual to one of the treatments. All right, so if you have your individuals, they would be randomly assigned. You would have group 1, and this group would have an exercise regimen. Then you would have group 2, and they would do no exercise. So you would have two groups, the group that did partake in exercise, the group that did not. Then at the end of the year, you could see how many colds they have and do a direct comparison. But this is an experiment because you were imposing this group to exercise, whereas in observational, they may or may not have. You did not tell them to. This is completely randomized experiment. We have what is called a randomized block experiment. So this is similar, except for the word block. This is when your individuals are sorted into blocks, which is a common feature that might affect treatment, and then randomly assigned to one of the treatments. Here's what that would look like. So you would have your individuals still, but now what we're going to do is we are going to separate these individuals into a particular block, a common feature. You could say a block of adults and a block of children. You could do male, female. That would be another example. Then you would take the adults and you would do a random assignment into group 1 that would partake in exercise, and then group 2 where there would be no exercise. And then the children would then be randomly assigned into group 1, which would receive exercise, and group 2, which would be no exercise. Goodness, having a hard time spelling here. So here is completely randomized, and here is when you separate them into a block, and our blocks is our adults and our children. Now, within these, you have what is called the control group, receives a dummy treatment, placebo effect. The variable does not influence the results. Now, in my example, I did not have a placebo effect. This would be like if you wanted to do a comparison of a medication where group 1 received medication that would actually affect them. Group 2 received a pill, but it actually was a pill like that had no effect on them. That would be a placebo, where this group thought they were receiving treatment, but the pill actually didn't have anything in it. That would be what we call a placebo effect. Randomization, sorry, having a hard time spitting that out today. Used to assign individuals to treatment groups helps prevent bias. And this is where the randomization went when we did this random assignment here. Replication, repetition of a research study, meaning you do it over and over and over again, used to determine if findings can be applied to other participants and circumstances. The more you do it, the more valid the results get. All right, another common technique for gathering data would be surveys, and this is the process of gathering data about people by asking them questions, and this would be like filling out a simple survey. All right, additional gathering data terminology. Sampling, measurements or observations from part of the population are used. If you recall, earlier in Chapter 1, we talked about the difference between population and sample. So when your measurements and observations come from a sample, then it's called a sampling. Experiment, treatment is deliberately imposed. This would be exercise. Simulation, a numerical likeness of real-world outcomes. We did a simulation of flipping a coin in the last section. Census, measurements or observations from the entire population. So sampling is from part of the population. Census is from the entire population. So that is just some additional terminology you need to be familiar with.